Hi there, good to see you guys. Now, I've said for many months now, I'm not going to read on the actual issues on the border. It's too gruesome, intuitively, but it doesn't mean I'm not following what's going on, and it doesn't mean we should all ignore it. That's not what it means. So I'm going to look at the issues around the thinking about this stuff. And of course, the now famous "go back where you came from" tweets. I love that because, of course, in the case of AOC, she was probably born within a mile of where the Yeti was born. It's just provocative rubbish, isn't it? It's just absolute hypocritical crap. Here he is the child of immigrants. He married two, and he's down on immigration. Is ICE or anyone investigating Melania's little number? Remember, she got the Einstein visa. She was so special and so important. No one else in America could do what she was going to bring to the table. She's very special. The hypocrisy is just mind-bending. But it got me thinking too, this "go back where you come from" stuff. In Australia, we have it too. So while Britain invaded and stole this continent from Aboriginal people and then made it a penal colony, right, for prisoners. Now, this was actually all about punishing the poor, the criminal history of our convict colonies. If you were actually a murderer or a rapist, you got hung in England. So they weren't sending out murderers and rapists. They were sending out factory girls or domestic servants who stole a handkerchief. If you actually read the court records of what individual convicts were convicted of, stealing a horse, things like this, and you were sentenced to 7 years, 14 years, or life, basically in chain gangs working. It was all about punishing the poor, and in particular Irish prisoners, political prisoners. So we don't have a pretty history with this stuff, so I feel I can speak on this issue, right? But the other thing, talking about "go back where you come from," just a little bit of history, troops. Mexico actually went all the way up through, and Texas only became Texas, I think, in 1836 or something. Before that, it was Mexico, and the same with lots of Southern California and stuff. You know, the state of America that we know as the state now systematically, took land from Mexico. So I think there should be a class action on that. But today, because it's such a horrendous topic, I'm using the Toth deck and looking at the issues around the border. I also want to dedicate this video very specially. Some of you who follow Latin American history will know about the mothers of Plaza de Mayo, and they were the women in Argentina in the 70s, right, when it was under a military dictatorship, and you were forbidden to assemble in any large numbers, and people were routinely abducted, tortured, and killed by the military regime. And these women, for years, once a week, would go out and protest in the main square, wearing white headscarves to symbolize the children they had lost. And eventually Catholic guilt might have kicked in, and they were part of eventually bringing down the military regime because they kept going for years, facing risk of imprisonment themselves. Nuns joined them. And I think it's sort of like that now. Mothers need to stand up. Everyone who's decent needs to stand up. Okay, so tell us what's happening on the border. What's happening on the border? All right. Yes, not fun. I didn't expect this to be fun. But here you have it, the Six of Wands. This is Trump's victory. In the Thoth deck, this is called victory. This is his power to debase humanity. This is the call, the red meat aspect of what he's doing. He thinks it's his winning card. Well, it's got to be from his point of view because he has no others. He has no policy. He can't grasp foreign policy. He doesn't care what happens domestically. So for him, he's going to keep going. More of the same. What's behind this issue? The Two of Wands, dominion over others. There's a forceful element. He's doing it because he can, right, over a more vulnerable group. This is particularly revealing what's underneath it, the devil. So in other words, as I've said often in videos, I do not believe in this external other being who is the devil. The devil is bad behavior by people. It is the ripping off of others. It can be addictions, it can be vices, it can be all sorts of things. But in this case, it's his sheer indifference to suffering. That is the devil's work. He gets another six here, the Six of Swords. Now this, to me, is interesting. Look at the symbology of this. The Christian cross with the swords all going through it, which brings me to my next digression. I'm talking now directly about Pope Francis, who I thought, when he first got in, he's better than most of them. He understood the issues of poverty and how it gets perpetuated by capitalism, and he routinely criticizes people for materialism and their lack of compassion and so forth. My question to the Catholic Church, to the Vatican, is where are you? You are one of the richest institutions on earth. Why have you put nothing back into these Catholic countries? I'm talking Honduras, El Salvador, Puerto Rico, on and on through the entire continent and Central America. These are Catholic countries where the poorest people in the world give the church money. What's wrong with that fundamental dynamic? I would suggest everything. What is the church giving back? Nada. Not good enough. Not good enough. And I think also I would like to see a movement from the Hispanic and Latino communities directly appealing to the Vatican. They should be doing public international shaming on the conditions on the border and actually intervening on behalf of these people who for 400 years have been ardent Catholics. Stop there, Lena. Stop ranting. The outcome card. Not fun. This pain and cruelty will continue until people stand up. You do not have to be a soothsayer to understand it. So it's important for women to stand up. It's important for men to stand up. It's important for doctors. It's important for lawyers. People need to really shine a light on this national disgrace. I'll be with you in just a moment. Sorry about the interruption. I am so back. Now, I'm going to do a little read now on how the GOP are going to handle Trump's out-and-out racism. But before that, I want to thank you all for your comments. I was a bit worried I was going to be savaged by people who love Kamala Harris unconditionally. Don't misunderstand me. I think she has a huge contribution. But I'm pleased that actually many of you did agree with that assessment. Mind you, this is an echo chamber too, so we might just all be on the same wavelength. But I don't think so. I think people do respect her and her capacity to be a major player into the future. But there's just a bit too much ego going on there to be a team player, perhaps. So anyway, let's look at the GOP. Are they going to do anything to rein in the Yeti, or are they going to continue to be the proud progenitors of the Handmaid's Tale and racism that's unprecedented? You know, all sorts of accounts of day-to-day racism are coming out on people's, cameras and so forth, as if it ever stopped. Of course it didn't. But now the genie's out of the bottle. The numbers are going up of hate crimes, big and small. Just dreadful. Just dreadful. And with the exception of half a dozen, we're not hearing much from the GOP, who, again, I would remind you, in case you've forgotten, are allegedly the Christians. They wouldn't know a Christian virtue if it came up and bit them on the arse. I mean, really. What are they reading? What Bible? Someone, I think, has pulled the pages out of the Bible and substituted it with sort of Dale Carnegie, how to get rich and influence people. I don't think they are actually paying any attention to religious teachings. And while you've got the imbecilic Betsy DeVos in charge of education, that alone is a travesty. That alone should be reported to the Human Rights Commission. How to dumb down another generation of Americans, keep Betsy DeVos in the job. She's a scandal. She's a one-woman walking scandal. So, GOP and racism. Let's have a look. I did quite a bit of shuffling, and the cruelty card comes up again. Where do they sit on this? Oh, I'm okay, so it really doesn't matter. So that's all right. We can all go home now. I'm having a very nice life, thank you. I'm a GOP lawmaker. I've got shitloads of money coming in, and everything's fine for me. What is your problem? Behind that, the Ten of Wands, the burden. All sarcasm aside, they know enough politically to know this is a bit of a burden. I only say a bit because I think, a good percentage of their people would agree with it. But it is going to be a burden and drag on them. The Princess of Discs. Right, underneath it all, I think this card is, to me, one of the most interesting in the Thoth deck. What happens in the next election, I'm not alone in saying this, but the women's turnout is absolutely essential. This, to me, is speaking of Republican women. This is an uncomfortable card, right? There's all these spiky antler-like things surrounding the Princess of Discs. So I think this is representing, the good church-going GOP mom in a red state who is actually a little bit uncomfortable with what's going on at the border and isn't comfortable with the sheer rudeness of Trump and so forth. This is them wrestling party versus the character of the man. Republican women will play a significant role. And this is them, I think, in this uncomfortable middle ground. They don't have to make a decision just yet. There's a million miles in the modern world between here and the 2020 elections. But this is them wrestling with this stuff. So back to the GOP lawmakers who are quite happy to stay as closeted gays, are quite happy for 14-year-old girls to get married because they're pregnant. That's better than going to Planned Parenthood, isn't it? You know, that'll show her. That's the men driving these hideous, ridiculous laws that are so... They're not just anti-abortion, they're designed to punish women. It's nothing to do with the babies, we know that. So this is them in their comfortable cloud cuckoo land. These two cards, you notice? This is the men. But the women aren't entirely going along with it. The question being, what will the GOP do about Trump's racism? Well, the answer would be nothing. They'll let the cruelty continue. And that is because they are devoid of any moral responsibility. They have no heart, they have no shame. He's actually their perfect leader. He's just a bit out of line, but really, they're baby yetis themselves, you know. So, well, everybody, that's my contribution to this stuff on the border, and let's all take a moment to really send love to those who are being held in such hideous conditions. And I will say again, as an Australian, I am totally horrified by our policy of sending asylum seekers. It's not illegal to seek asylum somewhere. They kept calling them illegal asylum seekers. No, legal asylum seekers. People can't help being a refugee. You don't walk 1,000 miles because you want a bit of exercise. It completely dismisses the misery that people are trying to escape. But in Australia, we've got offshore processing, which should be illegal. The alt-right groups all over the world can't believe we, Australia, have it, and why can't they have it? It's disgusting. And the equivalent of our Dems have done bugger all about it. They've gone along with it. So I'm not sitting here as someone who comes from a virtuous country lecturing you guys. Also, thanks for all your comments on healthcare. I'll keep returning to that issue because it's so major. Okay, see you real soon. Bye.